I think just growing up, I always had kind of a knack for putting things together in a way that felt very presentable. So even when I was a little kid and I was working on like book reports or school projects, I was always more concerned with how the information fit together and looked and how it was presented. I mean, I like the research part too. I love research and I love like writing also, but that combination of like coming up with the information and then like packaging it in a way that's very presentable and aesthetically pleasing was a huge part of my whole childhood. And I would get a lot of comments from teachers about how good my projects looked versus like, I mean, I did well on the projects too, but it was always like they were blown away by how everything was presented. And I kind of turned everything into a show. Like even when I was presenting like a book report on the Titanic, I would like set the whole stage and like bring in props and have like a whole thing. And I just liked it all to be like very thought through and like presented in a nice way. So I think that all started to like I started realizing like trends and like how I like to present information and things that I was really drawn towards, and took some classes in high school and then took journalism class in high school, which started to kind of like bring all of these interests together. And that's when I joined the yearbook staff. And that's where I learned how to, you know, use InDesign, and InDesign became like my best friend. And I had this like InDesign pillow on my bed all through high school, like a total nerd, but it was like my favorite thing in the world. And so yeah, that was just kind of how it all started. And then went to KU, and the rest is history. But yeah.
I'd be curious to know how many people on creative teams were in the yearbook class in high school. Seems like a pretty high percentage.
Yeah, a lot. I think it's the gateway drug for sure, but it's fun. I mean, it's a cool combination of a lot of different things. You get to work with the photographers, you get to work with copywriters. It's like, yeah, you really start to understand what it's like for a whole bunch of different people coming together to create one thing. And it was, I'd say, working on the yearbook at my high school was like still to this day one of the harder, more like time consuming and like just difficult things that I've done. Like it was 500 and some pages, and we had to gather information from all these places. But I feel like I grew up so much, like in 1 year being the yearbook editor. I like learned how to communicate with people. I learned how to send professional emails. I learned how to work with the vendors who made the yearbook. And it was like all those things were starting to click, and I was starting to understand kind of where my future was. So it was a great experience for me.
And you went through KU, which has a great program.
Mhm.
They just put out very, I think, qualified students. What's something though that you didn't really get a chance or didn't even know that you should learn in college that you picked up later on and maybe one of your first jobs?
Web design. One of my first projects at my first job was like designing a website mock-up for like a homepage. It was for the NAIA. And it was like me and my creative director were both presenting mock-ups like against each other. And I had never really made a real website before, or anything like in Photoshop, anything real. Everything we did in school was like just very pretend. Like it didn't really have to do anything. It didn't have to go past just looking sort of like a website. And so that was a insane learning curve for me. But I think being, you know, just thrown into stuff like that is the best way to learn. So it was pretty intimidating, but it ended up going fairly well. I definitely will say that I didn't really know the difference between a wireframe and like what the website was supposed to look like. So it was pretty straightforward as far as like just making the wireframe look a little cooler. So I kind of learned the difference between wireframes and actual like UI design, you know, a little later, but yeah.
Everybody goes through the same process. Like web designers rarely graduate with like a real understanding. And yeah, the
Yeah.
wireframe is like paint by number until you realize, oh, I don't
I'm like,
have
oh
to stick
wait,
to
that
this.
doesn't, yeah, that was hard to figure out. Took me a while, but yeah.
That's cool. Have there been things that you have done in your career that you enjoy more than others, or maybe some that you're saying, oh, I would like to spend more time there if I given the chance?
I think the projects that always are kind of near and dear to me are ones that have kind of a greater purpose and mission behind them. Um, I really enjoy working with nonprofits. I really enjoy the relationship that you can build with like a smaller marketing team where you actually like, where I actually become like kind of one of their main points of contact, and I'm really helping them and able to kind of see what their real needs are. Sometimes, you know, in that case, there's kind of like what maybe the board thinks they need, but then like as you get to know them better, you start to understand what, you know, what would really help them. So I think for me, I love the variety of work that comes with, you know, advertising and just being in the Midwest and kind of having that variety and not really being super pigeonholed in that way. But I think usually the projects that I just like put my whole heart into and like can't stop thinking about after work and like just want to give everything to are the ones where I have a really strong relationship with a client and there's a really kind of deeper meaning and purpose behind it. So, you know.
That's cool. It's one of the nice things about working at an agency is that you get a front row seat to all of these different companies. And I mean, we've never set out to do nonprofit work, but we catch some really interesting projects every year. And, you know, you can work on 4 or 5 in a single year sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What do you think it is? Because there's some clients of ours that are not nonprofit. They're definitely for profit, but I see our team pouring a ton of time and energy. You can think of a few. Usually it's because the client has a great relationship with us and shows a lot of appreciation. But like if a client was to say, hey, how do we get the most out of our team, or how do we be a good client? Like, what do you think? Like, what would be your tips to them?
I think for me, it's like if I feel like I can just kind of speak openly, and like even this morning we had a really great conversation with a client about a photo shoot that we're working on, and in my opinion, not every conversation has to be the super buttoned up presentation of information where we come to the table with everything. Sometimes it can just be a conversation. And I feel like the more that you're able to sprinkle those in throughout the relationship, and it's not always just us coming to them with a 25-page deck that we've rehearsed and is all perfect. And there's this mix of that, you know, where there's a good cadence of we're giving them new work, we're showing them, you know, our worth and we're hitting our deadlines, but there's also opportunities for more casual conversation where we can work through things together and we can just have kind of open conversations. So I think kind of trying to find that balance. It's tough right now. We don't get as many opportunities to talk to them or be face to face, but that's why I think it's even more important to try and like not make every conversation so serious. So I think even this morning, just having a little bit less of a formal conversation and just getting their take on some stuff kind of quickly was really nice. It's a nice way to like break up, so we don't always feel like they have to come with us with answers, or we always have to have something super formal to show them for us to be able to talk. So
Yeah, I agree with that. It's like the balance between being buttoned up and like really delivering versus, but also just like being the people side of the business and developing a relationship, and you can just talk openly about things. It's a mistake that we made early on in Native in the first couple of years. We were so concerned with just being so buttoned up and like these deliverables that would just knock people's socks off, but we didn't really take the time to do some of the in between things. And we had to learn like, oh yeah, that like, people still value that too.
yeah, for sure.
Plus it's some of the fun stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
um so what are some differences between Native and other places that you've worked? I'm sure there's a few things that stand out.
I think there's definitely a little bit more of the kind of research side that comes into a project. I think there's more experts and people that you can kind of pull into different things, which is been really helpful for me on different projects to not have to have all the answers all the time. I think it's great that we have so many different people coming at it on the team from a different perspective that can kind of all come together. So I feel like when I need help with something specific based on a project, I know who to go to and get that information. And it doesn't always feel like it has to be all on me, which in some places it does feel like you have to kind of come up with the research, come up with the idea, and then execute it all together. And I don't think that that's where like the strongest ideas come from. I think it's good when it's a combination of skills that are all coming together to create something. It's really important to have that diversity of thought and background. So that's something I really appreciate.
Yeah, we used to talk about like, let's not be solo tasking. Solo tasking can only be so good. Like it's nice when someone can like really sink their teeth into something, but it's also
Yeah.
feels like you're on an island sometimes when you're doing that. So I think most people say their favorite times are during brainstorms and hearing how other people approach it. So like how do we use that as much as possible?
Yeah, definitely.
So you've been here for a bit. We turned 5 during quarantine. Are there favorite like moments or stories that you share with like friends or others and say, "Oh yeah, we did this at work"?
Um, I think like initially when I first started, I really loved a lot of the lunch and learns and debates and things that we were doing. I think it was a really genuine effort to come together as a group, but in a meaningful way and not just in a drinking and partying way, which is sometimes hard to do. But I felt like right when I started, there was a lot going on in that respect. And it was really nice to join a group that was like wanting to communicate and wanting to share information so much. Um, it's like kind of crazy how smart everyone is. And even when we have those conversations, it's cool to hear just how like hear people talk about that stuff and just get all these different perspectives and viewpoints. Obviously I loved the disco roller skating party because I planned it, but um, besides that, I would say the lunch and learns have been really cool. Debates have been really cool. The brainstorms, I've had a lot of fun like helping facilitate some of those. I think it's just fun when we can all get together and kind of shake out and like mix up what we do every day. I think it's gone really well so far and everyone really enjoys it.